Okay, so today we're continuing with paragraph 35, which concerns Jesus meeting the woman at the well. I believe the question that we were on was question number 77 or 76? 76. In your own words, what is Jesus' response to her question? And remember, the question was, who's right, the Jews or Samaritans, about where we're supposed to worship? All right, so what is Jesus' response? Jesus' response. Your own words, Luke.
In the end, the place you worship matters.
Okay, good. Anybody else? The first thing he does, though, is point out that between Jews and Samaritans, who's right? Does he take a side? Yeah, he does. He says the Jews have it right. You guys are wrong. Because remember, what they did was they changed the scriptures. They changed the place. And the Jews were right about that. So he tells her that. He answers the question. The Jews have it right. But the important thing is not the place, but the spirit of worship. It's not the place that's important, ultimately. Actually, he says there's a time coming, so he's not even saying that it's here yet. And one could probably argue that the time he's talking about is certainly at his death and resurrection. It becomes more important to understand who Christ is and to worship God in spirit. Not that that's not always been important, but then secondly, when the temple was destroyed in AD 70, the place absolutely doesn't matter anymore because there is no place that has been designated. All right, so question number 76, he does answer her question. The Jews have it right between the two, but there will come a time when the important thing will not be the place. All right, so in number 76, we won't take a point on that. Let's go to number 77. Jesus tells her that the time will come when true believers will worship God in what two spheres? Morgan, give me one. No, not what he says. What's he say, Stephen?
Spirit.
In spirit and
Truth.
in truth. In spirit and in truth. Because those things are so tied together, we'll just give 1 point there. In spirit and in truth. So let's briefly address that. What's it mean, worshiping God in spirit? What's it mean, worshiping God in spirit? And remember, he predicates this on the fact that, what? God is spirit. So those who worship him must worship him in spirit. All right, so what does that eliminate? What does that indicate is not important?
Flesh.
The flesh. Because God is not flesh, therefore it's not important a physical location, a physical being of any kind. In fact, what does God tell us in the Ten Commandments? He says, don't make any images. Why? Because I don't look like anything that you could come up with. Right? God is spirit. So what possible image could you make that would reflect God? None. So he says, don't do it. Because then what happens? You end up worshiping an image instead of the reality. So he says you must worship in spirit. And so what's the limitation of that? Is it limited by any particular place? No. Is it limited by any particular kind of body that you have? No. There are no limitations that way because it's all internal. It's a spiritual thing. Now, we also have to ask ourselves the question that when we're doing things that we consider worship, is it necessarily worship? Oftentimes people call singing worship, as if that's the only time you can do it. That's a limitation that the Bible doesn't give us. But let's say that other people are worshiping or singing worship songs. Because you're singing those songs, does that automatically mean that you're worshiping? No, not at all, right? if you are taking communion, does that automatically mean that you're worshiping? No. Why? Because it's a spiritual thing. It's not something you're doing physically. Now, can those physical things be an avenue by which you worship God? Yeah. And I would expand it much more than that. As you know, worship is something that we can be involved in 24/7. It's anything we're doing is worship. It's ascribing worth to God. So worship is something that's done in spirit. It's a spiritual thing, not a physical activity, although physical activities may be a part of what you're doing spiritually. Does that make sense? Now, he also says that those who worship the Father must worship him in spirit and in truth. What do you think that means, in truth? Why does Jesus say you must worship him in truth? Might be a couple ways you would understand that. Anybody want to take a stab? What does it mean to worship him in truth?
Because people misunderstand some of the sayings, or people twist his word that he says.
Yeah, so it has to be according to what he has said. We worship him according to the truth that he has given to us, and especially through Jesus Christ, right? He is the truth. So if we're worshiping God and we have a skewed idea of who Jesus is, then we're not really worshiping God, right? What was that? Oh, the blind came down a little bit?
Mhm.
Thought the birds were back. No, the birds are gone. Thank you. So we have to make sure that what we're worshiping is the true God. You know, and so often I see things among Christian people that they say things about God that are not biblical. And if your God is what this person, this Christian teacher or Christian person is saying about God, if it's not lined up with the biblical God, then what have they done? They've created an idol. They're worshiping something that's not true. And so they're not really worshiping even though they think they are. You follow? Jesus said we must worship in spirit. It's a spiritual thing. Don't think just because you're doing a physical activity you're worshiping. You're down to your knees and you're praying. Does that mean you're worshiping? Not necessarily. And especially if you're praying to a God that is of your own imagination that doesn't fit the God of the Bible. So those two things are extremely important for us to understand. I hope you get it. We must worship him in spirit and truth. Any comments or questions? All right, next. Jesus' statement about God in question number 78, that God is spirit, relate to the question that the woman asked. So how did you state your answer there? We've talked about it already, but what did you put down? Question number 78. What do you have, Noel?
I said to know where to worship.
Louder?
To know where to worship.
To know where to worship? What does Jesus say about where to worship?
It doesn't matter where. It matters, like, in spirit.
Yeah, that's the point. It's not the place. It's not the place, it's your heart. It's your attitude. It's your spiritual connection, right? So it's not the place. That's the important thing there. All right, how many of you think you had something close to that? Okay, not very many. If you think you were close to that, give yourself a bonus point, otherwise we won't count that one. Apparently that was difficult for you. I'm not sure why. All right, next he talks about, or the woman brings up the Messiah. I know Messiah is coming. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us. Okay, she's not quite willing to accept everything Jesus is saying. Yeah, you're a prophet, but I'm going to wait for the Messiah because he knows more than anybody, and he'll tell us what's up. And then Jesus declared, I who speak to you am he. Dwight Pentecost in his book points out this. Thus far we see that Christ has given 4 great revelations to the woman. I wonder if you could pick them out if I asked you, but we won't take the time to do that. Listen. First, he gave the revelation concerning the new life. And by talking about living water, he stated that he came to give everlasting life. Second, he revealed the spiritual need of the woman. He spoke of her immoral relationship with the man with whom she was living. This caused the woman to suppose Jesus was a prophet. The third great revelation was he revealed the nature of the Father, declaring God is spirit and consequently can be worshipped in any geographical place. And then the fourth revelation that he gave her was he revealed himself to her as the Messiah. So those are important things for us to note as we look through here. Okay, verse 27 and following, the disciples returned, and you know what happened there as they're trying to figure out what's going on. All right, number 79. Let's focus on this. What does the woman do that indicates that she was in a hurry to tell the people of her city about Jesus? Jordan?
She left her water jar.
Yeah, how many had that? Okay, great. You observed that. Number 80. What evidence did she give to the people that Jesus was possibly the Messiah? Noah?
He told her all that she ever did.
Right. Here's somebody who told me everything I ever did. And she says, could this be the Messiah? Could it be? She's asking. And then number 81, again with the symbolism. What does food symbolize in Jesus' response to his disciples? What does food symbolize? He said, I have a food you don't know about. Luke?
Spiritual things.
Right, spiritual things. Or if we want to use a word that relates to food, we could say spiritual sustenance or spiritual food. How many had something along those lines? All right, you should be able to get that one. All right, and then we see the people came out of town. The disciples trying to get Jesus to eat. We already saw that. And people start coming out. So number 82, to what does Jesus compare the people coming out of the city towards them? Lexi?
For 81, is it okay if I said the will of the Father?
He said what?
The will of the Father.
Okay, yeah, because he does say, he uses those terms, the will of the Father. All right. Okay, 82, to what does Jesus compare the people coming out of the city? Landon?
I have fields that are ready to be harvested.
Right. He said it's like crops. There are crops walking out of the city towards us. Now, I have read, and I did not find any reference to back this up, but I know I've read in the past that the kind of crops that grew in that area, and I can't remember what they were, but when they were ripe, you could see white. They would be white. That's why you saw saying the crops are white, ready to harvest. Whatever crop it was there, that you could see it's ready. And that the Samaritans coming out of the city would have had white turban-like things on, and so they would have looked like crops walking towards them. I don't know if that's really true or not, but it makes a good illustration anyway. So Jesus said, look, the crops are all ready for harvest. So, number 83, analyze. What principle of evangelism is being taught here? Anybody come up with one? What do you think he's teaching here about evangelism? He said the crops are ready. Brenna?
I said Jesus is the one who did the hard work and he sowed the ground. Followers of Christ are the crops and benefiting from what he has done for us.
Great. That's exactly right. That's such a fantastic answer. You're ringing the bell. All right. Anybody else have something similar to that? Jesus is the one who sowed the seeds, and now the disciples get to reap the crop. So often the one who sows doesn't reap. It's somebody else who comes along and reaps. So what are we responsible to do? We're responsible to sow the seed. Sometimes there's been an emphasis in many parts of Christianity or churches to go and reap, maybe where it hasn't been sown. You know, like that's the most important thing. Well, it's important to sow the seed. As Paul says later on, one sows, one waters, but God gives the increase. God's the one that brings in the harvest. And so he may do that through somebody else than the one who is giving the word. You know, if you talk to anybody who has given God's word to people and tried to show to them the truth, you'll find that oftentimes they don't see the result of that. And once in a while, we may get to see that. I'll give you a quick example. When I was in 8th or 9th grade. I witnessed to my girlfriend at that time, although, then that didn't mean a whole lot. But I witnessed to her and showed her in the Bible, how to become a Christian, and never really knew anything, whether she accepted that or not. And then I moved away from there the next year, so I didn't really have any contact with her the rest of our lives. But somebody, probably about maybe 15 years after I graduated from high school, 10 years after graduating, was living, that I knew from where I went to high school after I moved in Painesville, Ohio, knew this person, and their family then moved to Grove City, Pennsylvania, and she was friends with my parents, and she either contacted them or somehow told me that she ran across this young lady that I had witnessed to back when I was in junior high in Grove City, Pennsylvania, a long ways from, well, somewhat distant from where we grew up, and that when she found out that this lady knew our family, told her that I had led her to the Lord. I had no idea, and I've never seen her since either. But once in a while, God lets you see what happens. So we don't always know. I mean, our responsibility is to share the Word of God and let God take care of how that happens. And we just have to be faithful in what He's called us to do. And sometimes we get to reap what somebody else has sown. Sometimes we get to lead somebody to the Lord that maybe somebody else planted the seed years before. And that's okay. We're all on the same team, right? It's not a matter of racking up numbers. It's a matter of following the Lord. Okay. Any other comments about that? All right. So kind of answered number 84. Who do you suppose did the sowing here? We could say Jesus easily enough, right? Some might take it back even further and say that maybe these people were familiar with John the Baptist and his preaching. I'm not sure if we could make that case or not, but either one of those would be all right. So we won't count that one. Let's go on to 85. And I want to give you 4 stages of growth in the Samaritan woman's faith. All right. First of all, and this is by what she calls him. Can you look back in the text and tell me, what does she call him first? Can you see it? Anybody see it? What's the first thing she calls him?
Jew.
A Jew. All right. That's all she knows about him at first, is he's a Jew. All right. See if you can find the second thing.
Sir.
Sir. So that's kind of upping a little bit from, oh, you're a Jew. Now, sir kind of shows some respect, right? See if you can find the third one. Prophet. That's better than sir, right? Now she realizes that he is getting revelation from God. He's a prophet. And then what's the last? Messiah. See the progression there? And sometimes that is the case with people. First they have to, they may start out at a low level of understanding who Jesus is, but it progressively moves up the more they understand. All right, any questions there? Did you get that? First is Jew, then sir, then prophet, then Messiah. All right, then we're told that many of the Samaritans believed in him. And number 86, we have 2 stages of the evangelization of the Samaritans. What was the first stage? What did they believe first? Sean?
Don't have that one.
Stephen?
Don't have it either.
Sam? Mia?
Hearing and believing.
Hearing what? What did they hear first? Jordan?
What the woman had told me.
Right, the woman's testimony. Right? Isn't that what they say? We said we no longer believe just because of what you said, because first they did believe because of what the woman said, and then what's the second stage? Joel?
They invited him to stay with them.
Okay, but what was the second stage of their belief? That's what I want to think about here. The second stage of their belief. First, they believed what the woman said, and secondly, what? Brenna?
Believe what Jesus said.
They believed what Jesus said. You see that? You have the woman's words, and then you have Jesus' words. The 2 stages of the evangelist. How many had those 2 things? Okay, more than I thought. Okay, you may not have understood the question quite clearly. So I'll give you a bonus point if you got both of those, and otherwise we won't count it. Okay, number 87 is a chart. Let's compare and contrast the exchange that Jesus had with two different people. Kind of interesting, he's had a meeting with two different people here. One, Nicodemus, and secondly, a Samaritan woman, and we didn't even know her name. But there's some real contrast there. All right, so first, the person is Nicodemus. What was he religiously? What did you put down for that, Emma? A Pharisee. So which meant he thought he was very righteous, right? He was a Pharisee. Okay, what religiously was the Samaritan woman? This is a tough one. Griff?
Samaritan.
A Samaritan. Are you saying the Samaritan woman was a Samaritan?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you stumble into the light like nobody. No. You know, I like to kid Griff because he can take it. Yes, she is a Samaritan. You have something else?
Is it okay if I said she was the lowest and thought to be impure?
That would go with morally more than it would religiously. Religiously, she followed the teachings of the Samaritans. Okay, let's go to morally then. So, Brenda says that the Samaritan woman, do you have something different than what you had in the first column?
I thought she said thought to have no morals, and then afterwards she relied on Jesus.
Okay, so well, we want to look at what they were when they came to Jesus. So she is immoral. Anybody else have a different word to use for her? No, everybody had immoral, exactly. Exactly that word. Is that right? Is that what you want me to believe? Okay. What was Nicodemus morally? What was Nicodemus? Landon.
Or had he had no deceit and he was an Israelite?
No, you're thinking of Nathaniel,
Oh,
not Nicodemus. Zach, what about Nicodemus?
He's a law keeper.
He was a law keeper. Yes, that's exactly what I have. Where are you looking at my notes then? He was a law keeper. Anybody have a different way of saying it?
Tries to be perfect and keep all the law.
Tries to be perfect, keep all the laws. Anybody else? All right. And then socially, what was Nicodemus socially? How would you describe his social status? Noel, what do you have for that?
I said that he was in the Sanhedrin.
Okay, you could have said that. That indicates something about his social position. Anybody describe it in a different way?
I had him as a ruler of the Jews.
He was a ruler. Okay. What else?
I think it was like the upper class.
Upper class. A leader. Yeah. Okay. And then what about the Samaritan woman? What was she socially, Emma? An outcast. That's a good word. That's one I have too. Any other words you used? Okay. So what a contrast, huh? And we could go further. We could look at what physical thing does Jesus use with Nicodemus to illustrate spiritual truth. In a word, what physical thing does he use?
Rebirth.
Well, okay, he does use, yeah, okay, uses birth. I was thinking of the next thing he did and talking about how the Spirit works. What was that? Wind. And what physical thing does he use with the Samaritan woman?
Water.
Water. You got two W's, right? That might mean something. Wind and water. And we could go on probably and look more in depth at it. So that's an interesting thing to do. When you're studying the Bible, do those kind of things. And do character studies. Go back and forth and see what are some of the contrasts and comparisons. All right, how many of you were able to complete paragraph 36? Okay, not everybody. All right, there are only 3 questions here, so let's do that. What kind of reception did Jesus receive back in Galilee? What do you have, Emma? He was welcome. Yeah. Any other ways of putting it?
They had a feast.
Yeah, that shows you what they think of him, right? Anybody else? All right, and then number 89, why does this description follow what Jesus had said in verse 44? So verse 44 kind of goes back to something that Jesus had said previously, but they stuck it in here because it relates. So why is this description? Why does John put this here? Something that Jesus has said at another time, did he put it here? Why does he do that? Anybody analyze that? Brenna?
I said, even though they welcomed him with a feast and gave the signs and wonders to believe him, it is not a sign of true belief. It also indicates that he was going to his home.
Okay, except that even though Galilee is where his hometown is located, that's not where he is. When it says he's going to Galilee, he's not going to Nazareth. He's going to the eastern part of Galilee, as we'll see, and maybe that wouldn't be obvious to you. So what it's really pointing out here is that in Galilee, and you could be right too, it might have that idea, but it seems maybe to be a contrast between the reception he had in Nazareth. Remember what happened in Nazareth? What happened there when he read the scripture and basically said he's the Messiah?
They didn't like believe him. Like they didn't believe that he was the Messiah.
Yeah, and they didn't believe him, and what did they try to do? They tried to kill him, push him over the edge of a cliff. And so he says, prophet doesn't have honor in his hometown. So he's not going back to his hometown. He's going to another place in Galilee, in the same region, but not the same town. So that could be taken either of those ways, I think. Number 90, what motivates the Galileans to respond this way? What does it say is the reason why the Galileans were welcoming him and giving him a feast? What was it?
Because they had seen all that he had done
Where?
in Jerusalem.
Yeah. How did they see that? They're in Galilee. That's a long ways from Jerusalem. How did they see the stuff he did in Jerusalem? In fact, it's not even recorded for us. How did they see that, Lexi?
They went to the feast.
Because they were there at the feast, the Passover. They were there. They saw. And so they go back home to Galilee, and everybody's talking about, man, did you see what that guy Jesus did? Yeah, I hear he's from over there in Nazareth. And then all of a sudden he comes into their region. So, whoa, he's here. That guy that did all that stuff down in Jerusalem. And so they welcome him gladly and have a big feast for him. Any questions? All right, we have come to the end of a section, which is letter A, capital A, in your outline, in your notes. And so we're going to have a quiz tomorrow, which will be over A, the acceptance of his person, which covers paragraphs 28 to 36. Paragraphs 28 to 36.